Welcome back. Today we're exploring life as a coal miner in 1800s Wales, where black lung ravaged lungs and deadly mine collapses were all too common. First, you'll experience a full day in a miner's shoes. Then we'll dive into the real facts behind their brutal reality. Before we start, let me know where you're tuning in from, as it's very interesting to me. Now, on to the video. The first sound reaches you through the darkness. It's the distant clang of the colliery bell echoing across the valley. Your eyes open to blackness. The small window in your cottage shows no light yet. It rarely does when you wake. Your body knows the time without needing to see. Years of the same routine have taught your bones when to stir. The straw beneath you rustles as you shift. Your younger brother sleeps beside you, his breathing steady and deep. In the corner, your father's cough breaks the silence. It's a wet, rattling sound that has grown worse these past months. The coal dust settles in the lungs and never leaves. You've heard the older miners talk about it in hushed tones. Black lung, they call it. The price of bread. Your feet find the cold stone floor. The chill shoots through your body, waking you fully. No fire burns in the grate. Coal may be what you dig all day, but it costs money to burn at home. The irony isn't lost on you, though you've stopped thinking about it. You pull on your trousers, stiff with yesterday's dried sweat and coal dust. The fabric is rough against your skin. Your shirt follows, patched in 3 places by your mother's careful hand. The smell of coal dust is everywhere. It's in your clothes, your hair, ground into the very walls of the cottage. When you first started in the mines 5 years ago, at age 12, the smell made you sick. Now you barely notice it. It's become part of you, like the calluses on your hands or the permanent ache in your shoulders. Your mother is already awake, moving quietly in the small kitchen. She doesn't speak. Words are precious in the morning darkness. She hands you a piece of bread, hard and brown, and a cup of weak tea. The warmth is more important than the taste. You eat standing up, mechanically, fuel for the body that will soon be tested again. Through the thin walls, you hear the neighbours stirring, the Davies family to the left, the Evanses to the right. The whole row of cottages comes alive at once, like some great creature waking. Doors open and close, boots scrape on stone. The morning migration begins. You wrap your feet in rags before pulling on your boots. The leather is cracked and worn, but they'll last another month if you're careful. At the door, your mother presses a small cloth bundle into your hands. Your dinner, likely bread and maybe a small piece of cheese if you're lucky. She touches your shoulder briefly. No words pass between you, but the gesture says everything. Come home safe. Come home whole. The door opens to reveal a world of grey. The sky above is the colour of slate, heavy with moisture that isn't quite rain. The air tastes of coal smoke from the chimneys that are starting to wake. You join the stream of men and boys moving down the narrow street. Your boots splash through puddles of water mixed with coal dust, creating a black mud that coats everything. The houses press close on either side, built quickly and cheaply to house the growing workforce. Some lean against each other like tired men. The windows are small and few. Glass is expensive. And besides, what is there to see? The same grey streets, the same grey sky, the same procession of grey-faced men walking to the pit. You fall into step with others from your street. There's old Thomas, who's worked the coal face for 30 years. His back is permanently bent now, shaped by the low tunnels. Young David walks beside his father, only 10 years old but already heading underground. The law says he shouldn't work more than 10 hours, but laws made in London don't always reach the depths of a Welsh coal mine. The colliery grows larger as you approach. The winding gear stands against the sky like the skeleton of some ancient beast. Steam rises from the engine house, and you hear the rhythmic chuff-chuff of the pumps that keep the water from flooding the workings below. The headframe towers above everything, the great wheels already turning as the first shift prepares to descend. More men converge from other streets and paths. Hundreds of you now, all moving toward the same dark mouth in the earth. Few speak. What is there to say? The work waits below, same as yesterday, same as tomorrow. Some men smoke pipes, the tobacco glow brief points of warmth in the grey morning. Others chew tobacco, spitting black juice into the mud. The pit yard is chaos organised by routine. Men queue for their lamps, the fireman checking each one. The lamp is life underground. Without it, you work in absolute darkness. You take yours carefully, feeling the weight of it. The oil sloshes gently inside. You've learned to gauge how much remains by the sound, knowing when to surface before the darkness claims you. Boys younger than you dart between the men, carrying messages, fetching tools. Their faces are already stained with coal dust, marking them as surely as any uniform. You were one of them once, before you were strong enough for the real work below. You remember the pride you felt the first day you were allowed to descend, to join the men in the deep places. That pride faded quickly. The cage waits at the pit head, a metal box suspended over darkness. You crowd in with 15 other men, pressed close enough to smell the sweat and tobacco and fear that never quite leaves. The banksman checks each man, counting heads. Then the signal rings out, and the floor drops away. The descent is always the worst part. Your stomach rises as the cage plummets, the walls of the shaft flashing past in the lamplight. Water drips from the sides, spattering your face with cold drops that taste of minerals and darkness. The air grows warmer as you descend, and thicker too. Your ears pop from the pressure change, down and down past the different levels where other men get off to work their sections. You're bound for the deep levels today, where the coal is good but the conditions are worse. The cage shudders to a stop at your level, 900 feet below the surface. The gates open, and you step out into your workplace. The heat hits you first. Even in winter above, the deep mine is warm, sometimes hot. The rock itself seems to radiate heat, and the air is thick and hard to breathe. You follow the main roadway, your lamp casting dancing shadows on the walls. The ceiling is low here, forcing you to walk bent over. Your back protests, but you ignore it. Everyone's back hurts. The roadway branches into smaller passages, each leading to different workings. You know your way by feel now, by the particular curve of certain corners, the dip in the floor near the old workings. Other men pass you heading out, their shift done, their faces black masks of exhaustion. You nod to those you know, but don't speak. Save your breath for the work. Your working place is a narrow seam, barely 4 feet high. You drop to your knees and crawl the last 50 yards, your lamp held carefully to avoid breaking it against the low roof. The coal face waits, black and gleaming in the lamplight. Your tools are where you left them yesterday, pick, shovel, and wedge. You strip to the waist despite the morning chill. Soon enough, you'll be grateful for any cooling. The work begins with the pick. You swing it in the confined space, chipping away at the coal seam. Each blow sends vibrations up your arms. The coal comes away in chunks, some large, some small. You've learned to read the coal, to see where it wants to break, where the natural fractures run. It's harder than it looks, requiring strength and skill and endless patience. The dust rises with each blow, filling the air until your lamp barely penetrates the gloom. You tie a rag over your mouth and nose, but the dust finds its way in anyway. It coats your throat, your lungs, settling there like sediment in still water. You cough, spit black, and continue working. Time has no meaning at the coalface. There's only the rhythm of the work. Strike, break, load, move. Your muscles burn, but you push through it. The heat builds until sweat runs in rivers down your back, creating channels in the coal dust that coats your skin. You drink warm water from your tin bottle, careful to make it last. There's no more until the shift ends. A rumbling sound makes you freeze. Every miner knows that sound. The mountain talking, they call it. The weight of all that rock above shifting and settling. Usually it's nothing. Usually. You wait, muscles tense, ready to run if the talking becomes shouting. After a long moment, the rumbling stops. You breathe again and return to work. The boy arrives around what must be midday, though you can't be sure. He's perhaps 8 years old, pulling an empty tram along the rails. A trapper boy, they call them, because he also minds the ventilation doors. He looks tired already, and the shift is only half done. You help him load the coal you've cut, the heavy chunks filling the wooden tram. When it's full, he'll drag it to the main roadway where the ponies take over. You eat your dinner quickly, barely tasting the bread and cheese. Your hands are black with coal dust, but there's no water to wash them. You've learned not to think about it. The boy shares his water with you. His ration is smaller, but he's generous. You remember being that age, that afraid, that alone in the darkness. The afternoon passes in more of the same. Pick, break, load. Your pile of coal grows. The owner will weigh it at the surface, deduct for any stone mixed in, and pay you accordingly. On a good day, you might earn enough to keep your family fed. On a bad day, when the coal is hard or the seam thin, you might work 12 hours for barely enough to buy bread. A shout echoes down the passage, then another urgent and afraid. You drop your pick and crawl quickly toward the sound. Other men converge from their workings. In a wider section of the tunnel, you find the cause. A roof fall. Timber props have given way, bringing down tons of rock. Someone is trapped beneath. You join the rescue effort without hesitation. This is the unwritten law of the pit. When disaster strikes, you help. Tomorrow it could be you under the rocks. You work carefully but quickly, passing stones hand to hand, shoring up the roof as you go. The trapped man's mate tells you his name, Evan Roberts, a man with 3 children. It takes an hour to reach him. When you do, you can see it's bad. His legs are crushed, blood pooling in the coal dust. Someone sends for the stretcher bearers while you do what you can to comfort him. He's conscious, which might be a blessing or a curse. He asks about his boys, makes you promise to tell his wife he was thinking of her. You promise, though the words stick in your throat. The stretcher bearers take him away, their lamps disappearing into the darkness. You return to your coal face, but the work feels different now. The mountain seems heavier above you, the timber props more fragile. You work more carefully, testing the roof frequently, jumping at every small sound. Finally, the signal comes for the end of shift. You gather your tools, muscles trembling with exhaustion. The crawl back to the main roadway seems endless. Your knees are raw from the rough floor, your back screaming from hours of bent posture. Other men emerge from their workings like ghosts, all moving toward the shaft. The wait for the cage feels eternal. You stand in line, swaying on your feet, held upright more by habit than strength. When your turn comes, you crowd in again, the ascent seeming to take forever. The temperature drops as you rise, and by the time you reach the surface, you're shivering in your sweat-soaked clothes. The evening air tastes impossibly clean after the dust below. You blink in what passes for daylight. Grey clouds and the early darkness of winter. Your legs shake as you walk across the pit yard. The cold rain that starts to fall feels like a blessing on your overheated skin. The walk home is a blur. Your feet know the way without your mind's involvement. Other men walk beside you, all silent, all exhausted. The pub door stands open, yellow light and the sound of voices spilling out. Some men turn in, seeking the temporary comfort of beer and companionship. You walk past. The money in your pocket is for food, not drink. The streets are muddy rivers now, the rain washing coal dust from the air only to deposit it in black puddles below. Your cottage appears through the gloom, one small light burning in the window. Your mother has kept the lamp lit for you, spending precious oil so you won't come home to darkness. Inside, warmth and the smell of something cooking. Your mother doesn't comment on your appearance. What would be the point? You strip outside the back door, rain washing the worst of the coal from your skin. The tin bath waits inside, filled with water your mother heated over the fire. It's barely warm now, but it's enough. You lower yourself into the water, watching it turn black immediately. Your mother helps wash your back. You can't reach it properly, and the coal dust works into every crease and fold of skin. Her hands are gentle but thorough. She's done this every night for your father, now for you. The ritual of it is oddly comforting. Clean clothes feel like luxury against your skin. You sit by the small fire while your mother serves the evening meal, potatoes and cabbage with a small piece of bacon for flavor. Your father is already in bed, his coughing a constant background sound. Your younger siblings eat quietly, knowing you're too tired for talk. The food sits heavy in your stomach. Exhaustion pulls at you like the earth calling you back. You think briefly of Evan Roberts, wonder if he made it home, if he'll ever walk again. In the mines, you learn not to dwell on such thoughts. They'll drive you mad if you let them. Your bed calls, the same straw mattress, the same rough blanket. You fall onto it, still dressed, too tired to care. Your brother is already asleep beside you. Tomorrow the bell will ring again. Tomorrow you'll walk the grey streets again. Tomorrow you'll descend again. But for now there is only the darkness of sleep, deeper and more welcoming than any mine shaft. Your breathing slows, matching the rhythm of rain on the roof. Somewhere in the walls, a mouse scratches. Your father coughs. The cottage settles with small creaks and sighs. And you sleep, dreamless and deep. While above the cottage, the wheel at the pit head turns through the night, never stopping, never resting, counting the hours until the morning bell calls you back to the darkness below. But sleep doesn't come immediately. Your body, exhausted beyond measure, sometimes rebels against rest. The aches in your joints pulse with each heartbeat. Your hands, curled from gripping tools all day, resist straightening. The coal dust in your lungs makes each breath slightly laboured, a wheeze that your wife pretends not to notice, but which keeps her awake with worry. You think of tomorrow's work, though you try not to. The seam you're working grows thinner each week, forcing you to work in spaces that barely accommodate your body. The coal is harder there too, requiring more effort for less yield. Your pay has been dropping steadily, and with winter coming, the need for fuel at home adds cruel irony to your days spent mining coal you cannot afford to burn. The cottage settles around you with familiar sounds. Timber creaks as it contracts in the cooling night air. Your eldest daughter coughs in her sleep, a sound that sends fear through you. Too many children in these valleys develop the persistent cough that signals the beginning of consumption. The damp walls, the poor nutrition, the crowded conditions all contribute to the disease that stalks mining families as surely as roof falls stalk miners. Through the thin walls, you hear your neighbor's baby crying. The sound is weak, too weak. You've heard that cry before in other cottages, the fading strength of an infant who won't see another winter. Your wife stirs beside you, her maternal instinct responding even to another's child. But she doesn't wake. The exhaustion of her daily labor grants her deeper sleep than yours. Your mind drifts to your childhood, before the mines claimed you. You remember green fields, clear streams, the taste of fresh milk warm from the cow. Your family had a small farm in the hills above the valley, scratching out a living from thin soil and stubborn sheep. It was hard work, but clean work under open sky. Then the farm failed, crushed by debts and bad harvests, and your father brought the family to the valleys, where work was guaranteed, even if life was not. You were 12 when you first descended. You remember the terror of that first cage ride, the way your stomach seemed to stay at the surface while your body plummeted into the earth. An older miner, seeing your white-knuckled grip on the cage bars, had laughed not unkindly and said, "You'll get used to it, boy. We all do." He was right, but getting used to something and accepting it are different things. Those first months underground blur together in memory. The constant darkness, broken only by candle flames that seem to emphasize, rather than relieve, the blackness. The weight of the mountain above, a presence you felt in every creak of timber, every fall of small stones. The older boys who showed you the ropes, literally, teaching you to handle the hemp cables that controlled ventilation doors, showing you how to gauge the coal tram's weight, warning you about the places where gas collected. You learned the underground geography slowly. The main roads had names: Engine Plain, Mothergate, Deep Dip, but the smaller passages were known by the men who worked them. Davies's Heading, where young Thomas lost his finger, the hot place near the fault. Each name carried stories, warnings, memories of men alive and dead. The ponies fascinated you at first. These small, sturdy animals lived their entire lives underground, stabled in carved-out chambers that seemed palatial compared to your family's cottage. You learned their names and temperaments, which ones would bite, which could be trusted to find their way in absolute darkness, which ones knew to freeze when they heard the mountain talking. The ostlers who cared for them spoke to them in Welsh, the same endearments they might use with their children. You rose quickly from doorboy to driver's assistant, helping guide the ponies through the passages. The drivers themselves were boys only a few years older, but they carried themselves with the authority of their position. To control a pony and full tram through narrow, twisting passages in near darkness required skill and nerve. More than one boy had been crushed between tram and wall when a pony spooked or a wheel left the rails. At 14, you began learning to hew coal. An old collier named Griffiths took you on, more from pity for your widowed mother than any faith in your abilities. He was a hard man, scarred by 40 years underground, but fair in his way. He taught you to read the coal, to see the cleat and grain, to know where to strike for maximum effect with minimum effort. The coal will tell you where it wants to break, he said, if you learn to listen. Under his tutelage, you developed the particular skills of the trade, the precise angle of pick strikes that would bring down coal in manageable chunks rather than useless dust, the rhythm that conserved energy over a 12-hour shift. the constant awareness of the roof above, reading the signs of pressure and potential collapse. He taught you the miner's habit of testing the roof with your pick before starting work, listening to the ring of metal on stone that could mean the difference between life and death. You learned too the unwritten rules of underground life. Never take another man's tools, share water when asked, help without being asked when danger threatens. Don't whistle, it brings bad luck. Don't speak of accidents while underground. If a rat runs past you, follow it. They sense danger before men do. These superstitions, dismissed by managers and inspectors, contain generations of hard-won wisdom about survival in the depths. The economic realities of mining became clear as you transitioned from day wages as a boy to piecework as a hewer. Your income depended not just on your strength and skill, but on factors beyond your control. The thickness of the seam, the hardness of the coal, the honesty of the weighman who assessed your output, all affected whether you earned enough to live. You learned to argue at the scales, to watch for the thumb that added weight to the wrong side, to band together with other miners to demand fair treatment. You remember your first strike. You were 16, newly counted among the men, when word came down that wages would be cut by a penny per ton. It seems a small amount now, but that penny meant the difference between meat once a week and none at all. The union meetings in the chapel vestry, voices raised in anger and determination. The decision to strike, knowing it meant no income for however long it lasted. The strike stretched for 6 weeks. You watched your mother's face grow more pinched as she stretched the dwindling supplies. Your younger siblings stopped asking for seconds at meals, understanding without being told that there were none to give. The union provided what relief it could: soup kitchens for the children, small payments to the most desperate. But everyone suffered. You joined the picket lines, standing in the rain to prevent blacklegs from entering the pit. The confrontations sometimes turned violent, desperate men fighting over the right to work in conditions that were killing them all. The coal owners brought in workers from Ireland, men even more desperate than you, and housed them in the pit yard under guard. The sight of soldiers protecting strikebreakers while mining families starved burned into your memory. The strike ended, as they always did, in compromise. A half-penny reduction instead of a full penny, presented as victory by union leaders who knew it was merely a slower defeat. You returned to work alongside men you'd stood with on picket lines, the solidarity of the strike dissolving into the individual struggle for survival. But something had changed. You'd tasted collective power, seen that the owners could be forced to negotiate. The lesson stayed with you. At 18 you married. Mary lived 3 streets over, a miner's daughter who knew what she was signing up for. You'd courted her at chapel socials and Eisteddfodau, walking her home through streets that offered no privacy but allowed respectability. Your wedding was a modest affair, ceremony at the chapel, tea in the vestry, a photographer to capture the one day you'd both wear your best clothes. Your wedding night was spent in your mother's cottage, with only a curtain providing privacy from your siblings. Finding housing proved difficult. Every cottage in the valley was owned by the coal company, rented at rates that consumed a third of your wages. You eventually secured 2 rooms in a house shared with 2 other families. The walls were so thin you could hear every word spoken next door, every cough, every argument. Privacy was a luxury the working class couldn't afford. Your first child arrived within a year, born during a night shift when you were 900 feet underground. You emerged to daylight and the news that you had a son. The midwife, paid in vegetables from your small garden plot, had done her job well. Your wife, exhausted but proud, had already chosen the name. David, after your father. You held this tiny life, perfect and unmarked by coal dust, and felt the weight of responsibility heavier than any coal tram. The cycle of life in the mining valleys revealed itself fully as you became a father. The joy of children tempered by the knowledge of what awaited them. You watched your son grow, hoping against hope that somehow his life might be different, knowing that the economic trap of the valleys rarely allowed escape. Education was the only way out, but how could a boy study when the family needed his wages? Your days developed a numbing routine. Wake in darkness, walk to the pit, descend into deeper darkness, hack at the coal face, ascend to darkness, walk home, wash, eat, sleep, repeat. The seasons barely registered. Underground was always the same temperature, always the same absence of light. You might work through entire weeks in winter without seeing the sun, descending before dawn and emerging after dusk. The physical toll accumulated slowly but inevitably. The first sign was the morning stiffness that took longer to shake off. Then the persistent ache in your lower back from working bent double. Your knees, scarred from crawling through low passages, protested more loudly each year. The cough that started as occasional became constant, bringing up black phlegm that stained handkerchiefs beyond washing. You watched older miners with growing unease, seeing your future in their bent backs and laboured breathing. Men who'd been giants in your youth reduced to shadows, fighting for breath, unable to work but with no pension to support them. They survived on charity and the kindness of relatives, proud men reduced to dependency. You began to understand why miners aged so quickly, why a man of 40 looked 60, why few lived to see grandchildren grown. The small pleasures of life became more precious as the work grew harder. Your garden plot, carved from the hillside above the valley, provided not just food but escape. Working in the soil under open sky, growing things instead of extracting them, feeling sun on your back instead of rock above your head. The miracle of seeds becoming plants, carefully tended through the brief growing season, provided hope that growth was still possible in this valley of extraction. Music remained central to your life. The chapel choir practiced twice weekly, your voice joining others in harmonies that seemed to lift the roof. Singing underground was forbidden. It used precious breath and could mask warning sounds. But hymns ran through your head as you worked, their rhythms matching your pick strokes. At union meetings, Bread of Heaven became an anthem of defiance, hundreds of voices joining in Welsh solidarity. Your Welsh identity grew stronger in the valleys, paradoxically. The mine owners were mostly English, the managers and engineers outsiders who lived in better houses on the valley sides, looking down literally and figuratively on the workers below. Speaking Welsh became an act of resistance, a way of maintaining identity against forces that would reduce you to mere labour. You ensured your children learned Welsh first, English second, despite school policies that punished Welsh speaking. The bonds between miners transcended individual differences. Underground, it didn't matter if a man was Methodist or Baptist, whether he drank or abstained, whether his politics were liberal or Labour. What mattered was whether he'd share his water when yours ran out, whether he'd help shore up dangerous ground, whether he'd drag you to safety if the worst happened. These bonds, forged in darkness and danger, created a brotherhood that extended beyond the pit. You developed a reputation as a steady worker, reliable and skilled. This brought marginally better positions, working richer seams, partnering with experienced hewers, occasionally acting as spokesman in disputes with management. But better positions meant harder work, more dangerous places. The irony wasn't lost on you. Success in mining meant greater exposure to its dangers. The seasonal rhythms of mining provided structure to the year. The autumn push to extract coal for winter heating. The spring maintenance when pumps were overhauled and passages repaired. The summer exodus for the miner's holiday, when those who could afford it took families to the seaside. The winter struggles when short days and bad weather made everything harder. Each season brought its own challenges and small compensations. Your second child, a daughter, arrived during a period of relative prosperity. The coal seams were rich, international demand high, wages steady if not generous. You allowed yourself to hope that things might improve, that your children might have better lives. Your wife took in washing to supplement your wages, her hands raw from lye soap, but her spirit undaunted. Together, you were building something, not wealth, never that, but stability. The night continues around you as these memories flow. Your body has finally begun to relax, the day's labor loosening its grip. Tomorrow will bring more of the same, the early bell, the dark walk, the descent into earth. But for now, in this moment between today's survival and tomorrow's struggle, you allow yourself to simply exist. Your breathing deepens, matching the rhythm of your wife beside you. Your children sleep peacefully, safe for these few hours from the world's hardships. The cottage, for all its shortcomings, shelters your family. You have work, dangerous though it is. You have food, simple though it is. You have each other, and in the valleys that counts for much. The last conscious thought before sleep claims you is neither bitter nor sweet, but simply accepting. This is your life, not the one you might have chosen, but the one you must live. Tomorrow you'll face it again with the same quiet courage that carried you through today, and will carry you through all the tomorrows that follow, until the coal claims you one way or another, as it claims all miners in the end. Sleep comes at last, deep and merciful, carrying you away from the aches and worries into a darkness different from the mines, a darkness of rest rather than labor, of peace rather than danger. Your breathing slows to match the quiet rhythm of the house, while outside the wheel at the pit head turns through the night, marking time until the morning bell summons you back to the endless cycle of descent and return, darkness and brief light, that defines a miner's existence in these harsh but strangely beautiful valleys of Wales. The mountains of Wales held secrets for millions of years. Deep beneath the green valleys and grey peaks, prehistoric forests had been compressed by time and geology into layers of black carbon. Coal, they called it, though the Welsh had their own words. Glow carries more weight than the English term, speaks of something fundamental to the land itself. During the 19th century, these ancient deposits would transform Wales from a land of farmers and shepherds into one of the industrial heartlands of the British Empire. The geology of Wales made it particularly rich in coal deposits. The South Wales coalfield stretched from Pontypool in the east to the Gower Peninsula in the west, covering nearly 1,000 square miles. The coal measures ran deep, layer upon layer, formed during the Carboniferous period when Wales lay near the equator, covered in tropical swamps. Different types of coal lay at different depths, bituminous coal for heating and gas production, and deeper still the prized anthracite coal that burned hot and clean. Geography shaped destiny in Wales. The valleys that cut through the mountains provided natural routes for extracting the coal, but they also trapped the communities that grew around the pitheads. A typical mining valley might be only a mile wide but stretch for 20 miles, with steep sides that caught the smoke and dust, holding it close to the houses and people below. The rivers that carved these valleys, the Rhondda, the Cynon, the Taff, would turn black with coal waste. their waters poisoned by the industry that fed the empire. The transformation began slowly in the late 18th century. Small drift mines, where men followed coal seams into the hillsides, gave way to deeper shaft mines as technology improved. The invention of the steam engine allowed pumps to remove water from deeper workings, while advances in ventilation made it possible for men to work further from the surface. Each technological improvement meant coal could be extracted from places previously impossible to reach. By the 1850s, the Welsh coal fields were producing millions of tons annually. The quality of Welsh coal, particularly the anthracite from the western valleys, was renowned worldwide. It powered the British Navy's ships, heated homes from London to New York, and fueled the furnaces of the Industrial Revolution. The phrase Welsh steam coal became a mark of quality, commanding premium prices in international markets. This industrial transformation happened with stunning speed. Villages that had existed for centuries as small farming communities became towns almost overnight. Merthyr Tydfil, once a collection of farms around an old church, became the largest town in Wales, its population exploding from fewer than 8,000 in 1801 to over 50,000 by 1861. The Rhondda Valley, nearly empty in 1850, housed over 150,000 people by 1910. The mine owners, often English or Scottish entrepreneurs, built these new communities with one purpose: to extract coal as efficiently as possible. They constructed rows of identical cottages, packed tightly together to house the maximum number of workers in the minimum space. These cottages, built quickly and cheaply, typically contain 2 rooms downstairs and 2 bedrooms above. Families of 8 or 10 people might share this space, with lodgers often taken in to help pay the rent. The cottages themselves told the story of the industry. Built of local stone, they were functional rather than comfortable. Small windows limited heat loss, but also limited light and air. The floors were often bare earth or cheap flagstones. No cottage had running water. That luxury wouldn't arrive for decades. Instead, communal pumps served entire streets, and women queued each morning to fill their buckets. Sanitation in these rapidly growing communities was primitive at best. Privy closets, shared between multiple families, stood at the end of narrow alleys. These overflowed regularly, contaminating water supplies and spreading disease. Cholera, typhoid, and tuberculosis swept through mining communities with devastating regularity. In 1849, a cholera outbreak in Merthyr Tydfil killed over 1,400 people in a matter of weeks. The mining companies owned not just the mines and houses, but entire towns. They built and controlled the shops where miners had to buy their food, often at inflated prices. The truck shop system, though officially outlawed, persisted in various forms. Miners might be paid in tokens only valid at the company store, or find that credit at the shop was the only way to survive between paydays. This debt bondage kept families tied to particular mines, unable to leave even when conditions were intolerable. Water was a constant concern in mining communities. The same geological forces that created coal seams also created complex underground water systems. Springs that had run clear for centuries became contaminated with coal dust and chemical runoff. Wells were sunk deeper and deeper, searching for clean water, but often found only more contamination. Many families relied on rainwater collected in barrels or water carried from distant clean sources. The role of women in mining communities was complex and often overlooked. While legislation in 1842 banned women from working underground in British mines, they remained essential to the industry's function. A miner's wife typically rose at 4 a.m. to prepare her husband's breakfast and pack his dinner. After he left for the pit, she faced a day of endless labor, washing coal-blackened clothes without running water, preparing meals on limited budgets, caring for children, and maintaining what cleanliness was possible in houses where coal dust penetrated every surface. Washing clothes was particularly arduous. The coal dust ground into fabric required hours of scrubbing, often with harsh lye soap that cracked and bleeding hands. Water had to be heated over coal fires, carried in heavy buckets, and the wet clothes dried in kitchens already cramped with daily life. Many women washed for lodgers as well as family, earning a few extra pennies to supplement their husbands' wages. Children in mining families faced harsh realities from birth. Infant mortality rates in mining communities were among the highest in Britain. Those who survived infancy often suffered from respiratory problems caused by coal dust and smoke. Education, though theoretically compulsory after 1870, remained sporadic. Schools were overcrowded and under-resourced, and many families needed children to work as soon as they were able. Boys as young as 6 might start as door boys in the mines, sitting alone in darkness for 12 hours, opening and closing ventilation doors as coal trams passed. By 8 or 10, they might graduate to pushing coal trams through the narrow passages. Girls often went into domestic service or worked in the surface operations of mines, sorting coal from stone in the picking sheds, their fingers bleeding from the sharp edges. The 1842 Mines Act had banned children under 10 from working underground, but enforcement was weak and age verification non-existent. Mine owners and desperate families colluded to circumvent the rules. A boy of 8 might be listed as 10 on the employment rolls, and inspectors, when they came at all, rarely questioned the deception. The economic reality was stark. Families needed every possible income to survive. Education for mining children, when it happened at all, was basic. The 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic, were taught by rote in overcrowded classrooms. Welsh-speaking children often received instruction only in English, a language many didn't understand. Teachers, poorly paid and overworked, struggled to maintain order in classes of 60 or 70 students of various ages. Sunday schools, run by various religious denominations, provided additional education and served as important community institutions. Here, children might learn to read using the Bible, sing hymns, and absorb moral teachings that their parents hoped would guide them through life's hardships. For many mining children, Sunday school provided their only exposure to literature and learning beyond the basics. The physical development of mining children was often stunted. Poor nutrition, a diet heavy in bread and potatoes with little meat or vegetables, combined with a lack of sunlight and clean air, left many undersized and prone to illness. Rickets was common, leaving children with bowed legs and curved spines. These physical markers of a mining childhood often lasted a lifetime. Inside the mines themselves, a complex hierarchy existed. At the top were the hewers or colliers, skilled men who actually cut the coal from the face. These men took pride in their craft, reading the geological signs, knowing where to place their cuts for maximum effect. A good hewer could produce several tons of coal in a shift, earning relatively good wages when the seams were productive. Below the hewers in status but essential to operations were the hauliers, men and boys who moved the cut coal from face to shaft. In the earliest days, this hauling was done by human power alone, with women and children dragging sledges of coal through passages too low for standing. Even after women were banned from underground work, the hauling remained brutal labor, performed in temperatures that could exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The introduction of ponies to underground haulage somewhat eased the burden, though it created new challenges. These ponies, often bred specifically for mine work, spent their entire lives underground. Stabled in underground chambers, they might not see daylight for years. Miners developed deep bonds with these animals, sharing their food and ensuring their care. When a pit pony died, it was mourned almost as much as a human colleague. Ventilation in 19th century mines was primitive and dangerous. The earliest method involved lighting a fire at the bottom of one shaft to create an updraft, drawing air down another shaft. This furnace ventilation consumed precious coal and created additional hazards. Later systems used fans powered by steam engines, but many smaller mines continued to rely on natural ventilation, which was inadequate for the deeper workings. The tools of the trade were simple but required skill to use effectively. The mandrel, or pick, was the primary tool, its weight and balance crucial for efficient work. Each miner maintained his own tools, sharpening them at the underground blacksmith shops that larger mines maintained. Shovels for loading coal, wedges for splitting larger pieces, and boring rods for placing explosive charges completed the basic toolkit. Lighting underground evolved slowly. For much of the 19th century, miners relied on candles, each man responsible for his own supply. The introduction of safety lamps, the Davy lamp being the most famous, reduced the risk of explosions in gassy mines, but provided less light than candles. Many miners illegally modified their safety lamps for better illumination, defeating the safety features and causing numerous disasters. The danger of explosion haunted every mine. Fire damp, largely methane gas, seeped from coal seams and accumulated in poorly ventilated areas. A single spark from a pick striking stone from an opened lamp, from the underground fires used for ventilation, could trigger catastrophic explosions. Afterdamp, the poisonous gases left after an explosion, often killed more men than the initial blast. Black damp, or choke damp, was another invisible killer. This mixture of nitrogen and carbon dioxide displaced oxygen in poorly ventilated areas. Miners learned to watch their candles. If the flame burned low and blue, black damp was present. The only warning might be a sudden headache or drowsiness before unconsciousness claimed the victim. Canaries, more sensitive to gas than humans, became living warning systems in many mines. Roof falls remained the most common cause of death and injury. The weight of thousands of feet of rock above pressed constantly on the underground workings. Timber props and crossbeams held this weight, but wood rots in the damp conditions underground, and the constant pressure eventually overcame even sound timbers. Experienced miners learned to read the signs, the crack of overstressed timber, the trickle of small stones, the subtle movement of the roof. The physical toll of mining work was severe and cumulative. Miners' nystagmus, an eye condition caused by years of working in poor light, left many older miners unable to focus their vision. Knees damaged by years of crawling in low seams became arthritic and painful. Backs bent by constant stooping refused to straighten. These were the visible injuries. The invisible damage to lungs was often worse. Pneumoconiosis, called black lung or miner's phthisis, was endemic in mining communities. Coal dust, inhaled day after day, year after year, accumulated in the lungs, forming hard nodules that impaired breathing. The disease progressed slowly but inexorably. A man might work for 20 years before symptoms became severe, but once they did, the decline was steady. Coughing, shortness of breath, and eventual respiratory failure awaited most career miners. Medical understanding of occupational lung disease was primitive in the 19th century. Doctors might diagnose miner's asthma or black spit, but effective treatments didn't exist. Some physicians prescribed changes of air, advice that mocked men who couldn't afford to leave their jobs. Others suggested various inhalations or tonics, none of which addressed the fundamental problem of scarred, dust-filled lungs. The human cost of coal mining in Wales was staggering. Between 1850 and 1920, over 3,000 miners died in major disasters alone. This figure doesn't include the countless individual deaths from roof falls, equipment failures, and occupational diseases. Each major disaster became seared into community memory, referenced by location and date like historical battles. The Tynewood Colliery disaster of 1877 exemplified the sudden catastrophes that could devastate communities. An underground flood broke through into the workings, trapping 14 men and boys. Rescue efforts continued for days as water was pumped out, but only 4 survivors were brought to the surface. The youngest victim was just 14 years old. The entire Rhondda Valley attended the mass funeral, work stopping as thousands paid their respects. The Universal Colliery explosion of 1913 in Senghenydd killed 439 men and boys, remaining Britain's worst mining disaster. The explosion, caused by coal dust ignited by sparks from underground signalling equipment, ripped through the mine just after the morning shift descended. Rescue workers, themselves miners from nearby pits, risked their lives entering the gas-filled workings. They brought out some survivors, but mostly recovered bodies. Many burned beyond recognition. These disasters revealed both the best and worst of mining communities. The rescue efforts showed extraordinary bravery, with volunteers descending into mines they knew might explode again at any moment. The fundraising for widows and orphans demonstrated community solidarity, but the inquests often revealed preventable causes, ignored safety warnings, inadequate ventilation, cost-cutting measures that prioritized profit over lives. The aftermath of disasters followed depressing patterns. Inquests would be held, recommendations made, and minimal changes implemented. Mine owners, protected by limited liability laws and powerful political connections, rarely faced meaningful consequences. Compensation for widows was minimal, perhaps a few pounds, and the right to stay in company housing for a few months. Children orphaned by mining disasters often ended up in the same mines that killed their fathers. Individual tragedies happened daily in the coal fields. A man crushed by a falling rock, a boy caught in machinery, a haulier kicked by a frightened pony. These deaths might merit a paragraph in the local newspaper, but were too common to generate wider attention. Families developed fatalistic attitudes, knowing that injury or death could come any shift. Women learned to read the signals, the whistle blowing at the wrong time, the gathering crowd at the pit head, the knock on the door. The mental toll of mining work received even less attention than the physical damage. The constant awareness of danger, the claustrophobia of working in confined spaces, the darkness that seemed to seep into the soul. These psychological burdens weren't recognized as legitimate medical concerns. Men self-medicated with alcohol, leading to high rates of alcoholism in mining communities. Domestic violence, though rarely discussed publicly, was common in households where men brought their underground tensions home. Despite the hardships, or perhaps because of them, mining communities developed rich cultural traditions. The Welsh language, suppressed in schools and official contexts, thrived in the mining valleys. Men composed poems about their work, their struggles, their hopes. These weren't the refined verses of educated poets, but raw, powerful expressions of lived experience. Poetry competitions at Eisteddfodau became venues for miners to articulate their lives in ways that official records never captured. Music provided another outlet. Welsh mining communities were famous for their male voice choirs, The harmonies developed in chapels and pubs, carrying messages of solidarity and hope. These choirs sang at strikes and celebrations, at funerals and weddings. The songs ranged from hymns to union anthems, from traditional Welsh melodies to compositions written by miners themselves. When miners sang Tybyddion Rhondda, or Men of Harlech, they sang not just notes but their identity. Religion played a complex role in mining communities. The established Anglican Church often aligned with mine owners, preaching acceptance of earthly hardship in exchange for heavenly reward. But non-conformist chapels, Methodist, Baptist, Congregationalist, became centers of working-class organization and resistance. Chapel deacons might also be union organizers, and sermons might contain coded messages about solidarity and justice. The temperance movement found fertile ground in mining communities where alcohol abuse was common. Chapel-based temperance societies provided alternative social spaces to pubs, organizing lectures, concerts, and social events that didn't revolve around drinking. For some miners, signing the pledge to abstain from alcohol became a source of pride and a way to assert control over their lives. Folk beliefs persisted alongside official religion. Miners developed elaborate superstitions about underground work. Whistling in the mine was forbidden; it might summon roof falls. Seeing a woman on the way to work was bad luck. Finding a robin in the mine meant death was near. These beliefs, dismissed by educated outsiders as primitive superstition, served important psychological functions, giving miners a sense of control in an environment where death was random and frequent. The Welsh concept of will found particular expression in mining communities. This untranslatable term encompasses emotional fervour, passionate eloquence, and spiritual transport. In chapel services, will might manifest as spontaneous prayer or singing. In union meetings, it could transform a routine gathering into a passionate call for justice. While gave emotional release to men whose daily lives required stoic endurance, the labour movement in Welsh mining grew from these cultural roots. Early attempts at organisation faced fierce opposition from mine owners, who blacklisted union members and evicted them from company housing. The Merthyr Rising of 1831, though not exclusively a miners' revolt, showed the potential for violent resistance when workers were pushed too far. The raising of the red flag during this uprising created a symbol that would resonate through labour history. Strikes became regular features of coalfield life as miners organised to demand better wages and conditions. The 1871 strike in South Wales saw 30,000 men stop work for better wages, establishing patterns of collective action that would define the industry. Mine owners responded with lockouts, evictions, and the importation of strikebreakers, often from rural Wales or Ireland. Violence erupted regularly as communities defended their strikes against owners' attempts to break them. The formation of the South Wales Miners' Federation in 1898, known as the Fed, created a powerful voice for Welsh miners. Leaders like William Abraham, known as Mabon, advocated for sliding-scale agreements that tied wages to coal prices. While these agreements provided some stability, they also meant miners' incomes fell during economic downturns, regardless of the dangers they faced or the work they performed. Union meetings happened in whatever spaces were available: chapels, back rooms, or outdoors on mountainsides when weather permitted. These gatherings developed their own rituals and traditions: the reading of minutes, the careful recording of contributions, the democratic votes on action. These procedures gave miners experience in self-governance that mine owners and government officials preferred they never develop. Strike funds required careful management. Miners contributed pennies from already meagre wages, building resources for the inevitable conflicts. During strikes, These funds provided minimal support for families, perhaps a few shillings per week, barely enough for bread. Soup kitchens run by union members and sympathetic shopkeepers kept strikers' children from starving. The sight of these children, thin and hollow-eyed, became powerful propaganda in labor disputes. Women played crucial but often unrecognized roles in strikes. While not union members themselves, miners' wives organized support networks, managed household resources during disputes, and sometimes confronted strikebreakers more fiercely than their husbands. The image of Welsh women throwing stones at blacklegs became part of mining folklore, though the reality involved complex decisions about family survival. Government response to mining disputes typically favored owners. Troops were deployed to mining areas during major strikes, ostensibly to maintain order, but effectively to protect strikebreakers and mine property. The 1910 to 1911 Cambrian Combine strike saw violent confrontations between miners and police in Tonypandy, events that entered working-class memory as examples of state oppression. Legal reforms came slowly and often ineffectively. The Coal Mines Regulation Act of 1872 mandated some safety improvements and limited boys under 12 to above-ground work. But enforcement remained weak, and loopholes allowed continued exploitation. Payment by weight rather than time meant miners worked frantically to fill their quotas, taking risks that hourly workers might avoid. The introduction of mechanical cutting equipment in the late 19th century changed underground work patterns. These machines, powered by compressed air, could cut coal faster than hand tools, but created new hazards. The noise was deafening in confined spaces, and the increased coal dust they generated made explosions more likely. Many older miners resisted the new technology, seeing it as a threat to their craft skills and earning potential. Mine inspectors, introduced by various acts of Parliament, faced impossible tasks. Responsible for vast areas with numerous mines, they could visit each location only occasionally. Mine owners received advance warning of inspections, allowing them to temporarily improve conditions. Inspectors who tried to enforce regulations strictly faced political pressure and sometimes violence. Many came from mining backgrounds themselves, creating conflicts between professional duty and class loyalty. The economics of coal mining created boom and bust cycles that devastated communities. When demand was high and prices good, new pits opened and wages rose. Men flocked to the valleys, creating housing shortages and driving up rents. But when recession hit or foreign competition increased, mines closed with little warning. Entire communities could be destroyed economically within months, leaving thousands without work or hope. International events affected Welsh mining profoundly. The American Civil War created demand for Welsh coal to replace lost American supplies. The opening of the Suez Canal increased demand for high-quality Welsh steam coal for shipping. But the development of coal mines in Germany, Poland, and elsewhere created competition that Welsh mines, with their increasingly difficult geology and militant workforce, struggled to match. By 1913, the South Wales coal field employed over 250,000 men, producing 56 million tons of coal annually. These statistics represented the peak of the industry, but masked growing problems. The easier seams were exhausted, forcing work in thinner, deeper, more dangerous areas. Productivity per man decreased as geological challenges increased. Younger men, seeing opportunities elsewhere, began leaving the valleys. World War I initially increased demand for coal, but also took thousands of young miners into military service. Women again entered surface works, and older men worked longer hours to maintain production. The war's end brought economic collapse as international markets disappeared and returning soldiers found no work. The promises of homes fit for heroes rang hollow in valleys where heroes returned to the same overcrowded cottages and dangerous pits. Cultural memory in mining communities was preserved through storytelling, song, and eventually written records. Old miners passed down tales of famous hewers, dramatic rescues, and bitter strikes. These stories, embellished with each telling, created a mythology of mining life that emphasized solidarity, skill, and endurance. The reality, often more mundane and miserable, was transformed into narratives that gave meaning to suffering. The Welsh language itself adapted to mining life. Technical terms from English mixed with Welsh to create a distinctive vocabulary. A mandrel became mandrel, coal face became fasglow. This linguistic fusion reflected the broader cultural adaptation as ancient Welsh traditions met industrial modernity. Children grew up bilingual by necessity, speaking Welsh at home and English at school or work. Education slowly improved in mining communities, though it remained focused on producing workers rather than thinkers. The 1870 Education Act established board schools, providing free elementary education. But attendance remained sporadic, especially for older children who could earn wages. Teachers faced classrooms where children fell asleep from exhaustion after early morning work, or arrived hungry and unable to concentrate. Some exceptional individuals escaped through education, winning scholarships to grammar schools or, rarely, universities. They left the valleys for professional careers. But this brain drain had complex effects on communities. While families took pride in educated children, the departure of the brightest reinforced the sense that success meant leaving, that the valleys offered no future beyond coal. Reading rooms and miners' institutes, funded by small deductions from wages, provided self-improvement opportunities. These institutions, managed by committees of miners, offered libraries, lectures, and classes. Men who spent days in darkness underground spent evenings studying geology, mathematics, or literature. The contrast between their brutal daily labor and intellectual aspirations created a distinctive working-class culture. The role of newspapers in mining communities evolved from simple news sheets to powerful voices for workers' rights. Papers like the Rhondda Leader didn't just report events, but shaped opinion and organized action. Editors, often self-educated miners themselves, wrote passionate editorials about safety reforms, wage justice, and political representation. Mine owners started their own papers to counter union influence, creating a battle for hearts and minds, fought in print. Photography arrived in mining communities in the late 19th century, providing visual records previously absent. Formal photographs of work groups carefully posed at pit heads showed men with dignity despite their blackened faces and worn clothes. Family portraits, expensive luxuries saved for special occasions, captured moments of cleaned-up respectability. But photographs of underground work remained rare. The technology couldn't handle the darkness and dust. Architecture in mining communities reflected their industrial purpose. Chapels, the most ambitious buildings, reached skyward with towers and spires, asserting spiritual aspirations against the horizontal sprawl of workers' housing. Their interiors, funded by years of penny collections, featured carved wood, coloured glass, and organs that represented community pride. The contrast with the cramped cottages where worshippers lived was stark and intentional. Shops in mining towns developed unique characteristics. The company stores, universally hated but often unavoidable, stocked basic goods at inflated prices. Independent shopkeepers, usually Welsh-speaking locals, extended credit during strikes and hard times, their survival dependent on community loyalty. Travelling salesmen brought exotic goods, ribbons, small luxuries, newspapers from distant cities, connecting isolated valleys to the wider world. The rhythm of mining communities followed shift patterns. The morning shift change saw hundreds of men walking in opposite directions, black-faced ones heading home, clean ones heading to work. Afternoon shifts disrupted family life, with fathers sleeping when children returned from school. Night shifts inverted normal patterns entirely, creating households where silence during daylight hours was essential for the breadwinner's rest. Holidays in mining communities were rare but intensely celebrated. The annual miners' holiday, unpaid but traditional, saw entire valleys empty as families travelled to the seaside. Barry Island became the traditional destination for South Wales miners, its beaches black with coal dust washed from thousands of bodies. For 1 week yearly, mining families escaped the valleys, though most returned with empty pockets to face another year underground. Christmas in mining communities mixed religious observation with secular celebration. Carol singing raised money for struggling families. Chapel services overflowed with worshippers who might not attend regularly. The tradition of plygain, services held before dawn, particularly resonated with miners accustomed to darkness. Families saved all year to provide special meals, though many children received only an orange and nuts in their stockings. Death rituals in mining communities developed distinctive features. The laying out of bodies happened at home, performed by women experienced in preparing the dead. Funeral processions might stretch for miles as entire communities paid respects. The tradition of funeral teas, where mourners shared simple meals, reinforced communal bonds. Burial clubs, funded by weekly pennies, ensured even the poorest received decent funerals. Children's games in mining communities reflected their environment. Boys played miners, digging holes and pretending to extract coal. Girls played house, but their games included washing coal-black clothes and nursing injured fathers. The playground rhymes incorporated mining terms and disasters, normalizing danger through repetition. These games prepared children psychologically for lives shaped by coal. Medical care in mining communities remained primitive throughout the 19th century. Doctors, when available, charged fees most families couldn't afford. Traditional remedies persisted: poultices for bruises, herbal teas for coughs, whiskey for everything. Wise women provided midwifery and basic health care. Their knowledge passed through generations. Mine owners resisted funding proper medical facilities, viewing injured workers as replaceable. The gradual introduction of medical aid societies funded by small wage deductions improved healthcare access. Miners' hospitals, built through collective effort, provided treatment for injuries and occupational diseases, but prevention remained neglected. Dust suppression underground was minimal, safety equipment primitive, and occupational health concepts barely understood. Treatment focused on patching up workers to return underground rather than preventing harm. Clothing in mining communities served functional purposes. Men's work clothes, moleskin trousers, heavy shirts, thick boots, were built for durability rather than comfort. Women's dresses, often homemade from cheap fabric, were designed for hard work. Sunday clothes, carefully preserved, provided the only opportunity for displaying respectability. The ritual of changing from work to Sunday clothes marked important weekly transitions. Food in mining households reflected economic constraints and cultural traditions. Breakfast might be bread and tea, perhaps porridge when oats were affordable. Snap, the underground meal, typically consisted of bread and cheese or cold bacon, food that wouldn't spoil in the heat below. Evening meals centered on potatoes, cabbage, and whatever protein could be afforded. The Welsh working-class dish, cawl, a hearty stew made from available ingredients, sustained many families. Gardens, where space allowed, supplemented mining families' diets. Men who spent days underground often spent evenings tending vegetables, finding peace in growing things. Allotments on hillsides above the valleys became miniature kingdoms, where miners exercised control absent from their working lives. Potato growing particularly mattered. A good crop could mean the difference between adequacy and hunger during winter months. The keeping of animals in mining communities provided additional food sources. Pigs, fed on scraps, might be shared between several families, the slaughter providing meat for special occasions. Chickens in small backyard coops produced eggs for protein. Some families kept pigeons, both for meat and for racing, the latter providing gambling opportunities and competitive outlets for men whose lives offered few victories. Washing and bathing rituals in mining households developed from necessity. The daily battle against coal dust required systematic approaches. Tin baths, filled with water heated on coal fires, served entire families in sequence. The order, father first, then older sons, younger children, and finally mother, reflected both patriarchal hierarchies and practical considerations about who was dirtiest. Privacy was impossible in overcrowded cottages. The impact of mining on the Welsh landscape was transformative and permanent. Mountains of waste slate, called tips, grew beside every mine. These unstable piles of rock and coal dust loomed over communities, ugly monuments to extraction. Streams ran black with coal washing. The air tasted of sulfur and smoke. Natural beauty, once the defining feature of Welsh valleys, was sacrificed to industrial production. Wildlife in mining areas struggled to survive. Rivers poisoned by mine runoff supported no fish. Birds avoided the smoke-filled valleys. The traditional Welsh relationship with nature, celebrated in poetry and song, was severed by industrial development. Children growing up in mining communities might never see clear water or green hillsides, their world bounded by black tips and grey skies. Attempts at environmental improvement were minimal and often resisted by mine owners as unnecessary expenses. The concept that workers deserved clean air and water was revolutionary, challenging assumptions about class and entitlement. Some enlightened owners built model villages with better housing and amenities, but these remained exceptions. Most miners lived and died in environments that damaged health from birth. The psychological impact of environmental degradation received no consideration in the 19th century, but the loss of natural beauty, the constant presence of industrial ugliness, the inability to escape from work, even visually, created mental stresses we now recognize as significant. The Welsh word hiraeth, a deep longing for something lost, took on new meanings in valleys transformed beyond recognition. Transportation in mining areas developed to serve coal rather than people. Railway lines connected pit heads to ports, but often bypassed working-class housing areas. Workers walked miles to reach mines because passenger services were afterthoughts. The sight of coal trains passing through communities whose residents couldn't afford train travel embodied the contradictions of industrial capitalism. The few miners who achieved positions of authority faced difficult choices. Overmen and deputies, promoted from the ranks, had to enforce owners' rules on former colleagues. Their position, working class by origin but management by function, created personal conflicts. Some used their positions to protect workers when possible. Others, desperate to maintain their elevated status, became harsher than owners in enforcing discipline. Time in mining communities was measured differently than in agricultural areas. The industrial clock replaced natural rhythms. Shift whistles, audible throughout valleys, regulated daily life. Being on the collar, working regular shifts, meant surrendering control over time to industrial demands. The pre-industrial Welsh concept of time, fluid and task-oriented, gave way to rigid scheduling that persists today. Aging in mining communities was particularly harsh. Men worn out by decades underground faced poverty if they could no longer work. No pensions existed. The poor law and charity were the only supports. Elderly miners might find light work on the surface if lucky, but most faced destitution. Seeing old miners begging outside pubs where they once drank as younger men provided stark warnings about the future. The stories of individual miners, though often lost to history, illuminate larger patterns. Di Roberts, who started work at age 7 and died of black lung at 52, leaving a widow and 6 children. Evan Thomas, who lost his leg in a roof fall but continued working on crutches because his family needed the income. William Jones, who taught himself to read at age 40 and became a union organizer, only to be blacklisted and forced to leave Wales for work. These individual tragedies multiplied across the coalfields created a collective experience that shaped Welsh identity. The shared suffering, the common struggles, the universal understanding of danger and poverty created bonds that transcended individual differences. A miner from the Rhondda had more in common with a miner from Northumberland than with a Welsh landowner living 5 miles away. Marriage patterns in mining communities reflected economic realities. Men typically married in their early 20s when they'd achieved full earning capacity. Women married younger, often leaving domestic service positions. Courtship happened at chapel socials, Eisteddfodau, or simply on the streets where young people promenaded during the few leisure hours. The concept of romantic love competed with practical considerations. Could he earn enough? Could she manage a household? Wedding celebrations in mining communities were communal affairs. The entire street might contribute to a wedding tea, each household providing what they could afford. The tradition of bidding weddings, where guests contributed money to help the couple establish their household, persisted from rural Welsh tradition. These contributions, carefully recorded, would be reciprocated at future weddings, creating networks of mutual obligation. Pregnancy and childbirth in mining communities carried high risks. Malnutrition, overwork, and poor sanitation contributed to high maternal mortality rates. Women typically worked until late in pregnancy and resumed heavy labor soon after birth. The tradition of lying in, a recovery period for new mothers, was a luxury few mining families could afford. Neighbor women assisted at births, but complications often proved fatal without medical help. Child rearing in mining households was communal by necessity. Older children watched younger ones while mothers worked. Neighbors minded children during emergencies. The Welsh tradition of mamgu, grandmother, caring for grandchildren while parents worked, evolved from rural patterns but intensified in industrial settings. These extended family networks provided essential support, but also perpetuated cycles of poverty as grandparents too old to work relied on younger generations. The role of alcohol in mining communities was complex and controversial. Pubs provided social spaces for men whose homes were overcrowded and whose work was isolating. The tradition of paying wet, spending the first portion of wages on drink, caused endless domestic strife. But pubs also served as informal labor exchanges, union meeting places, and centers for political discussion. The temperance movement's growth reflected both the real problems alcohol caused and broader struggles over respectability and control. Gambling, though illegal, flourished in mining communities. Pitch and toss schools operated on mountainsides. with lookouts posted for police. Betting on pigeon races, whippet races, or bare-knuckle boxing matches provided excitement and potential windfalls in lives otherwise predictable in their hardship. The possibility of a big win, however remote, offered psychological escape from economic determinism. The gradual introduction of leisure facilities beyond pubs marked social progress. Reading rooms, as mentioned, provided alternatives. Football clubs, often started by enlightened employers or temperance advocates, channeled competitive energies. Brass bands requiring discipline and practice became sources of community pride. These activities, though limited, began to create lives beyond work for some miners. The Welsh tradition of Eisteddfod Fodau adapted to industrial settings. Mining communities held their own competitions, with categories for poetry, singing, and instrumental music. These events preserved Welsh language and culture while providing platforms for working-class expression. A miner who won the chair for poetry achieved status that transcended his occupational position. These cultural achievements challenged assumptions about working-class capabilities. Political consciousness in mining communities developed through experience rather than theory. The daily confrontation with dangerous conditions and economic exploitation radicalized even conservative workers. Reading group-studied political texts, from Tom Paine to Karl Marx, translating abstract ideas into Welsh contexts. The growth of the Labour Party found eager supporters in valleys where liberal promises had repeatedly failed. The question of Welsh nationalism intersected complexly with class consciousness in mining areas. Many miners saw their struggle as international, aligned with workers everywhere rather than specifically Welsh. Others argued that English capitalism's exploitation of Welsh resources required nationalist responses. These debates, conducted in pubs and chapels, shaped modern Welsh identity in ways still relevant today. The impact of mining on family size and structure was profound. Large families were economic necessities. More children meant more potential earners, but they also meant more mouths to feed during the years before children could work. Birth control, though desired by many women exhausted by repeated pregnancies, remained unavailable or condemned by religious authorities. Family limitation happened through abstinence, folk methods, or dangerous illegal abortions. Gender roles in mining communities were strictly defined, but economically determined rather than ideologically chosen. Men's sphere was the pit and pub, women's was home and chapel. But these divisions reflected practical necessities rather than abstract ideals. Women's economic contributions through washing, lodging, and careful household management were essential. The idealized Victorian separate spheres had little relevance in cottages where entire families shared 2 rooms. The education of girls in mining communities received even less attention than boys. While boys might learn skills relevant to mining work, girls were expected to enter domestic service or marry young. The few girls who showed academic promise faced additional barriers. Grammar schools often had fewer places for girls, and families saw less economic benefit in educating daughters. Those exceptional women who achieved education often had to leave their communities to use it. Social mobility in mining communities was extremely limited. The path from hewer to overman represented the highest realistic aspiration for most. The few who achieved middle-class status through education or business success often found themselves caught between worlds, too elevated for easy friendship with former peers, but never fully accepted by established middle classes. This liminal position created its own psychological stresses. The development of cooperative societies in mining areas represented attempts at economic self-determination. Starting with simple buying clubs to secure bulk discounts, co-ops evolved into significant institutions. The Rhondda had dozens of cooperative stores by 1900, owned and managed by members. These provided not just economic benefits, but experience in democratic governance and business management. Insurance and mutual aid societies proliferated in mining communities, reflecting both the prevalence of death and injury and traditions of collective self-help. The Oddfellows, foresters, and similar organizations combined social functions with death benefits. The rituals of these societies, secret handshakes, ceremonial regalia, formal meetings, provided dignity and status in lives otherwise marked by subordination. The arrival of new technologies in mining communities happened unevenly. Electric lighting came to pit heads, while miners' cottages remained lit by candles or oil lamps. Telephones connected mine offices while workers relied on word of mouth. These disparities made visible the class divisions that shaped every aspect of coalfield life. Technology served production, not people. By the early 20th century, the Welsh mining industry had created a distinctive society. Neither fully industrial nor traditionally Welsh, mining communities had evolved their own cultures, values, and ways of life. The shared experiences of danger, poverty, and struggle created solidarities that transcended individual differences, but the costs in lives lost, health destroyed, environments degraded, were staggering. The legacy of 19th century Welsh mining extends far beyond the economic statistics of coal extracted and profits generated. It shaped Welsh national identity, created patterns of community organisation that persist today, and demonstrated both human resilience and the capacity for exploitation inherent in industrial capitalism. The miners who descended into darkness each day built the foundations of modern Wales, though they rarely lived to enjoy its benefits. Looking back from our contemporary perspective, the contrast with modern working life is stark. Today's workers, protected by health and safety legislation, compensation systems, and technological safeguards, can barely imagine the conditions their predecessors endured. The 8-hour day, the weekend, sick pay, pensions, all these we take for granted, were absent from 19th century mining life. Modern Wales still bears the scars of its mining past. Former mining valleys struggle with post-industrial decline, their communities hollowed out by the closure of pits. The tips remain, grass-covered now but still unstable. The chapels stand empty or converted to other uses. But the culture created in those harsh decades, the emphasis on education, the tradition of collective action, the pride in Welsh identity, continues to shape contemporary Wales. The environmental recovery of former mining areas demonstrates nature's resilience. Rivers run clearer, though heavy metals remain in sediments. Wildlife returns to valleys once poisoned by industry. Former coal tips are landscaped into country parks, but the human recovery takes longer. Communities built around single industries struggle to find new purposes. The skills of underground work don't transfer easily to service economies. Health services in former mining areas still deal with the industry's legacy. Rates of respiratory disease remain elevated generations after the last pits closed. The psychological impacts, the fatalism, the expectation of early death, the normalization of danger, persist in cultural memory. Support groups for former miners meet in community centres, sharing memories and managing ongoing health problems. Modern workplace safety, taken for granted by contemporary workers, arose directly from mining disasters and struggles. Every safety regulation represents lessons learned through death and injury. The requirement for risk assessments, safety equipment, and worker consultation all emerged from mining industry reforms. The principle that workers have rights to refuse dangerous work, was established by miners who faced imprisonment for such refusals. The comparison between historical mining wages and modern incomes reveals complex patterns. In pure monetary terms, miners earned pennies where modern workers earn pounds. But relative to living costs and considering purchasing power, the comparison becomes more nuanced. What remains clear is that 19th century miners generated enormous wealth while receiving subsistence wages. The distribution of industrial wealth remains contested, but the extremes of Victorian inequality have moderated. Contemporary debates about work-life balance gain perspective when compared to mining life. Modern concerns about email after hours or weekend work seem minor against 12-hour shifts underground. The concept of leisure time, now considered essential for well-being, was absent from mining life. Every gain in worker rights and conditions represents a step away from the extremes of 19th century exploitation. The role of unions in protecting workers, now often taken for granted or even resented, becomes clearer through mining history. Every safety rule, every limit on working hours, every protection against arbitrary dismissal was won through collective action. The rights modern workers enjoy weren't gifts from benevolent employers, but victories achieved through struggle and sacrifice. The transformation of child labor laws represents one of the starkest contrasts between then and now. Modern society's protection of childhood, the assumption that children should be in school rather than work, emerged from revulsion at mining industry practices. The images of 8-year-old children working underground helped drive legislative change that now seems fundamental to civilized society. Women's positions in contemporary society also contrast sharply with mining-era constraints. While 19th century mining communities rigidly limited women's roles, modern Wales sees women in every profession. The granddaughters of women who scrubbed coal-black clothes now lead corporations, universities, and governments. This transformation, achieved in just a few generations, demonstrates the pace of social change. The preservation of mining heritage in museums and heritage sites serves important functions. Former mines converted to tourist attractions allow visitors to experience sanitized versions of underground work. These sites memorialize the industry while making its hardships comprehensible to modern audiences. The guides, often former miners themselves, bridge past and present through personal testimony. Academic study of mining history has evolved from simple industrial history to complex social analysis. Historians now examine gender roles, cultural production, environmental impact, and psychological effects alongside economic data. The voices of miners themselves, preserved in oral history projects, provide perspectives absent from official records. This democratization of history honors those whose lives were deemed unworthy of recording by their contemporaries. The Welsh language's survival owes much to mining communities who preserved it despite official suppression. In the valleys where Welsh was the language of work and home, it remained vital. Modern Welsh language revival builds on foundations maintained by mining families who insisted on speaking their native tongue. The cultural nationalism that emerged from mining areas continues to influence Welsh politics and identity. Contemporary Welsh literature and arts draw heavily on mining heritage. Poets, novelists, and filmmakers return repeatedly to mining themes, finding in them metaphors for broader human experiences. The darkness of the pit, the solidarity of workers, the struggle against oppression, these provide rich material for artistic exploration. This cultural production ensures mining experiences remain part of collective memory. The lessons of mining history for contemporary society are numerous and vital. The importance of workplace safety, the need for environmental protection, the value of collective action, the dangers of unregulated capitalism, all emerge clearly from studying mining communities. These lessons remain relevant as new industries create new forms of exploitation and environmental damage. Modern Wales has largely moved beyond coal, embracing renewable energy and service industries. Wind turbines stand on hills once marked by pitheads. Former mining towns reinvent themselves as centres for technology or tourism. But the transformation remains incomplete. The values formed in mining communities, solidarity, resilience, collective action, provide resources for facing contemporary challenges. The story of Welsh mining is ultimately about human endurance in the face of extreme hardship. Men, women, and children faced conditions that seem almost unimaginable today. They built communities, preserved cultures, and gradually improved their conditions through collective action. Their struggles created the foundations for rights and protections modern workers inherit. As we conclude this journey through the world of 19th century Welsh mining, it's important to hold both the darkness and the light. The suffering was real and should not be romanticized. Men died young, children were robbed of childhood, women aged prematurely under impossible burdens. The environmental damage was catastrophic, the exploitation systematic. But from this darkness emerged powerful forms of human solidarity. Communities supported each other through disasters and daily hardships. Cultural traditions were preserved and adapted. Political consciousness developed that would eventually transform British society. The miners who descended into darkness each day were building more than coal stocks. They were building the foundations of modern Wales. The quiet heroism of daily survival in mining communities deserves recognition. Not the dramatic heroism of rescues and disasters, though those occurred, but the steady courage required to face each day's dangers. The miner who rose before dawn, knowing the risks, and descended anyway to feed his family. The woman who stretched inadequate wages to keep her household functioning. The children who studied by candlelight, hoping for different futures. Their legacy surrounds us in ways we rarely consider. Every workplace safety regulation, every environmental protection, every union right emerged from their struggles. The weekend, the 8-hour day, the concept that workers deserve dignity and protection, all were radical ideas that miners helped establish through their sacrifices. The transformation from the harsh world of 19th century mining to contemporary Wales spans only a few generations. Men still alive remember fathers or grandfathers who worked the deep coal. The speed of change can obscure how recently these conditions existed and how easily hard-won rights can be lost. Vigilance in protecting worker rights honors those who suffered to establish them. Modern technology promises to eliminate dangerous work, and automation has indeed removed many hazards. But new forms of exploitation emerge, often in countries where 19th century conditions persist. The coltan miners of Congo, the coal miners of China, the garment workers of Bangladesh face conditions Welsh miners would recognize. The struggle for human dignity in work continues globally. Understanding mining history provides perspective on contemporary challenges. Climate change, partly driven by the coal these miners extracted, now threatens their descendants. The transition to sustainable economies must consider mining communities still dependent on extractive industries. Justice requires that those who paid the highest prices for industrialization aren't abandoned in the necessary transition away from fossil fuels. The story of Welsh mining ultimately affirms human resilience while warning against forgetting its costs. The communities that grew around pitheads demonstrated that people can maintain dignity, culture, and hope in the harshest conditions. But they also showed the terrible price of unregulated industrial capitalism. Both lessons remain relevant. As this narrative draws to its close, consider the individual miner one last time. He rises in darkness, descends into greater darkness, and labors in conditions that damage body and spirit. Yet he maintains pride in his skill, loyalty to his colleagues, love for his family. He participates in creating the wealth that built an empire while receiving barely enough to survive. His story, multiplied thousands of times, is the story of industrial transformation. The Welsh mining experience was unique in its particulars, but universal in its themes. Wherever industrialization has occurred, similar stories unfold. Workers face dangers, communities form around workplaces, cultures adapt to industrial rhythms. The specific Welsh combination of factors, the geology, the culture, the historical moment, created distinctive communities. But the human experience resonates globally. Today's Wales has moved far from its mining past, but the shadows remain. In the shape of valleys carved by industry, in the accents that preserve working-class origins, in the political traditions that emphasize collective action, the mining heritage persists. Understanding this heritage helps explain contemporary Wales while honoring those who built it. The miners who descended into Welsh pits in the 19th century couldn't imagine the world their descendants inhabit. They worked in darkness so others could have light, suffered so others might prosper. Their legacy is complex: environmental damage and human suffering alongside community strength and progressive values. We honor them best by remembering both the darkness they endured and the light they helped create. The story ends where it began, in the quiet moments before dawn when miners stirred to face another day underground. In those moments between sleep and waking, between safety and danger, between hope and resignation, lay the essence of mining life. The bell would ring, the wheel would turn, and men would descend into darkness, carrying with them all the complexities of human endurance, dignity, and quiet determination that defined their age and shaped our own. The medical understanding of mining-related diseases evolved slowly through the 19th century. Early physicians, often employed by mining companies, attributed respiratory problems to weak constitutions rather than occupational hazards. Dr. Thomas Arledge's 1892 study of pottery workers' lung disease helped establish the connection between dust inhalation and respiratory illness, but similar recognition for miners came slowly. Company doctors had financial incentives to minimize occupational disease claims, often diagnosing bronchitis or natural decline rather than acknowledging industrial causation. The development of medical knowledge about pneumoconiosis followed a tortuous path. Autopsies of miners revealed lungs black with coal dust, solid as stone in advanced cases. Yet medical authorities debated whether this was harmful or merely cosmetic discoloration. Some physicians argued that coal dust was beneficial, claiming it prevented tuberculosis. This convenient theory allowed mine owners to avoid responsibility for workers' declining health. Not until the 20th century would medical consensus acknowledge coal dust as inherently harmful. Traditional healing practices persisted alongside official medicine in mining communities. Herbal remedies passed down through generations offered relief when doctors were unaffordable or ineffective. Comfrey for broken bones, willow bark for pain, various poultices for the cuts and bruises that were daily occurrences. These folk medicines, dismissed by educated physicians, often contained active ingredients that modern pharmacology would later validate. The wisdom of mining women who served as informal healers deserves recognition in medical history. The role of diet in miners' health was poorly understood, but critically important. The traditional mining diet, heavy on carbohydrates, low in fresh vegetables and protein, provided energy for hard labor but left nutritional deficiencies. Scurvy appeared in mining communities distant from fresh food sources. Rickets affected children deprived of sunlight and adequate nutrition. The mining diet became synonymous with poverty food, but families made creative use of available ingredients. Welsh miners' wives became expert at creating filling meals from potatoes, leeks, and occasional bacon. Food preservation in mining communities required ingenuity. Without refrigeration, families relied on salting, smoking, and pickling to preserve food. Root cellars carved into hillsides stored potatoes and turnips through winter. The autumn pig killing became a community event, with families sharing labor and dividing meat. Every part of the animal was used: blood for black pudding, organs for faggots, bones for soup. This nose-to-tail eating, now celebrated by contemporary chefs, was economic necessity in mining villages. The economics of company stores created complex dependencies. These stores, owned by mine operators, extended credit against future wages, creating debt cycles that trapped families. Prices were typically 20 to 30% higher than independent shops, but credit availability made them unavoidable during strikes or low-earning periods. The quality of goods was often inferior: adulterated flour, watered milk, rancid bacon sold as fresh. Miners' wives became expert at detecting such fraud, though their complaints rarely brought improvement. Independent shopkeepers in mining communities walked delicate lines. They needed miners' custom, but also required coal companies' tolerance. Those who extended too much credit during strikes might face bankruptcy. Those who refused credit might face boycotts. The successful ones, often Welsh-speaking locals with mining backgrounds, understood the rhythms of mining life. They knew when wages were paid, when credit was essential, when to forgive debts for families facing tragedy. These shops became informal community centres, where information was exchanged and solidarity maintained. The development of cooperative stores represented miners' attempts at economic independence. The Rochdale Principles, established by English weavers in 1844, inspired Welsh miners to create their own cooperative societies. Members bought shares, elected management committees, and shared profits as dividends. These stores sold quality goods at fair prices, undermining company store monopolies. The cooperative movement taught democratic governance and business skills while providing economic benefits. Banking and credit in mining communities operated through informal networks. Pawn shops provided emergency funds, with Sunday clothes and wedding rings regular pledges. Burial clubs and friendly societies collected weekly pennies to ensure decent funerals. Informal lending circles, often organised by women, provided small loans for emergencies. These financial networks, operating outside formal banking systems, demonstrated working-class ingenuity in managing poverty. The housing conditions in mining communities deteriorated as rapid growth outpaced infrastructure. Typical miners' cottages, built quickly and cheaply, suffered from fundamental design flaws. Single brick walls provided minimal insulation. Slate roofs leaked. Foundations laid directly on earth without damp courses allowed moisture to rise through floors. Windows, small to conserve heat, provided inadequate ventilation. These structural problems, combined with overcrowding, created perfect conditions for disease transmission. Overcrowding in mining houses reached extreme levels. A 2-bedroom cottage might house parents, 6 children, and 2 lodgers. Beds were shared in shifts, with night shift workers sleeping in beds vacated by day shift workers. Children slept crosswise on single beds, 4 or 5 together. Privacy was non-existent. Sexual relations between married couples occurred within hearing of children and lodgers. These conditions, shocking to middle-class observers, were normalized by economic necessity. The practice of taking lodgers provided essential income, but increased household burdens. Miners' wives cooked, cleaned, and washed for lodgers as well as family. Young men from rural Wales, drawn by mining wages, needed accommodation in already crowded valleys. The lodger system created complex household dynamics. Some lodgers became family members, marrying daughters or supporting widowed landladies. Others brought conflict, competing for resources and space in cramped quarters. Sanitation in mining communities remained primitive throughout the 19th century. Communal privies, shared by multiple families, overflowed regularly. Night soil men, employed to empty privies, often neglected mining areas for wealthier districts. Human waste contaminated water supplies, spreading typhoid and cholera. The 1875 Public Health Act mandated improvements, but enforcement in mining areas was weak. Company-owned towns had little incentive to invest in sanitation infrastructure that didn't directly serve production. Water supply problems plagued mining communities. Natural springs, contaminated by mine runoff and human waste, spread disease. Communal pumps served entire streets, requiring women to queue for water. During droughts, water was rationed. Some families walked miles to clean springs, children carrying small buckets. The arrival of piped water, when it finally came, transformed daily life. But this basic amenity reached mining communities decades after wealthier areas. The impact of mining on local ecosystems was catastrophic and lasting. Streams that had run clear for millennia turned black with coal washings. Fish populations disappeared. Vegetation died where acidic runoff poisoned soil. The traditional Welsh relationship with nature, fishing, foraging, walking, became impossible in industrialized valleys. Children grew up thinking black rivers were normal, never seeing the salmon runs their grandfathers remembered. Wildlife struggled to survive in mining landscapes. Birds avoided valleys filled with smoke and noise. Small mammals disappeared as habitats were destroyed. The ecological destruction was so complete that when mines eventually closed, restoration required decades. Modern environmental science recognizes mining damage as some of the most severe industrial impacts on ecosystems. The Welsh valleys became early examples of industrial ecology's failures. The noise pollution from mining operations transformed soundscapes. The constant thump of steam engines, the clatter of coal screens, the rumble of trams created industrial cacophony. Residents developed ability to sleep through noise that would disturb others. Children learned to shout to be heard over machinery. The natural sounds of birds, wind, and water were drowned in industrial noise. This acoustic environment, now recognized as harmful to health, was another unmarked cost of coal production. Air quality in mining communities was appalling by any standard. Coal smoke from thousands of household fires combined with industrial emissions created permanent smog. Washing hung outside came in dirtier than it went out. Respiratory diseases were endemic. The concept of fresh air became foreign in valleys where every breath carried coal particles. Middle-class reformers who prescribed country air for urban problems ignored that mining valleys were rural areas made uninhabitable by industry. The visual impact of mining transformed Welsh landscapes. Pitheads with their distinctive wheels dominated skylines. Slag heaps grew into artificial mountains, unstable and ugly. Railway lines scarred hillsides. The pastoral wails of romantic imagination gave way to industrial reality. Artists who came to paint Welsh scenery found apocalyptic landscapes instead of bucolic vistas. This visual transformation affected residents' mental health in ways only now being understood. Child development in mining communities faced unique challenges. Beyond the obvious health impacts, children's play was constrained by industrial dangers. Traditional childhood activities, exploring countryside, swimming in rivers, climbing trees, became impossible or dangerous. Play areas were streets between cottages or slag heaps. Toys were improvised from industrial waste. The concept of childhood as a protected time of development conflicted with economic needs that pushed children into work. The gender dynamics in mining communities were complex and often misunderstood. While men's work underground was dangerous and difficult, women's work maintaining households under impossible conditions was equally challenging. The strict gender segregation, men in the pit, women in the home, was economically determined rather than ideologically chosen. Some women preferred their exclusion from underground work, seeing it as protection. Others resented being barred from better-paying jobs. These tensions played out in union politics and family dynamics. Women's informal economic activities were essential to family survival. Besides taking in washing and lodgers, women engaged in numerous money-earning activities. They took in sewing, sold eggs from backyard chickens, grew vegetables for market, brewed beer, and provided midwifery services. This penny capitalism required entrepreneurial skills rarely recognized. The image of miners' wives as passive victims ignores their active roles in family economies. The experience of widowhood in mining communities was particularly harsh. Mine accidents left many women suddenly responsible for families without income. Company housing was tied to employment. Widows had weeks or months to vacate. Compensation was minimal and grudgingly given. Remarriage was often economic necessity rather than choice. The presence of young widows was so common that a specialized marriage market developed, with men seeking wives who already knew mining life's demands. Children's education in mining areas reflected class assumptions about their futures. The curriculum emphasized discipline and basic literacy rather than intellectual development. Boys learned enough arithmetic for wage calculations and enough reading for safety notices. Girls learned domestic skills presumed necessary for miners' wives. The rare child who showed academic promise faced enormous barriers. Grammar school fees, uniform costs, and lost wages made secondary education impossible for most mining families. The role of teachers in mining communities was complex. Often outsiders with middle-class backgrounds, they faced classrooms of undernourished, exhausted children. The best became advocates for their pupils, fighting for resources and opportunities. Others, overwhelmed by conditions, provided minimal education. Welsh-speaking teachers faced additional challenges in English-only schools. The cultural gap between teachers' expectations and students' realities created mutual frustrations. Adult education in mining communities demonstrated hunger for learning despite exhaustion. Miners' institutes offered evening classes in diverse subjects. Men who couldn't write their names learned literacy. Others studied geology, mathematics, economics, and literature. The contrast between days spent in intellectual darkness and evenings pursuing enlightenment was profound. This self-improvement tradition created generations of autodidacts who challenged assumptions about working-class capabilities. The development of public libraries in mining areas, often funded by miners' own contributions, provided crucial resources. Books were treasured possessions, carefully shared and discussed. Reading groups met in homes and pubs, discussing everything from technical manuals to political philosophy. The arrival of cheap editions made literature accessible to working-class readers. The miners' libraries, with their emphasis on education and improvement, became models for public library systems. Religious diversity in mining communities reflected Welsh nonconformist traditions. Baptist, Methodist, Congregationalist, and Presbyterian chapels competed for members. Each denomination had distinctive practices and social roles. Baptists emphasized adult baptism and congregational autonomy. Methodists stressed personal salvation and social reform. Congregationalists promoted democratic governance. These theological differences mattered less than shared opposition to established Anglican authority. The relationship between religion and labor politics in mining areas was intimate and complex. Many union leaders were also chapel deacons. Strike meetings opened with prayers. Union banners featured biblical texts alongside labor slogans. This fusion of religious and class consciousness created a distinctive political culture. The concept of industrial justice drew on biblical prophets denouncing oppression. Chapel values of mutual aid reinforced union solidarity. Secular alternatives to religious life slowly developed in mining communities. Workingmen's clubs, initially temperance-focused, evolved into social centers. These clubs offered reading rooms, game rooms, and meeting spaces without religious oversight. Socialist Sunday schools provided alternative education, emphasizing cooperation over competition. These secular institutions faced opposition from religious establishments, but met real needs for non-religious social spaces. The impact of geological variations on mining communities was profound, but often overlooked. Different coal types required different extraction methods, creating varied working conditions. Anthracite mining in Western Wales differed from bituminous mining in eastern valleys. Geological faults could make neighbouring mines vastly different in danger and profitability. Miners developed intimate knowledge of local geology, reading rock formations like texts. This practical geological education exceeded many university courses in detailed understanding. Technological change in mining proceeded unevenly, benefiting owners more than workers. Steam-powered winding engines replaced horse gins, allowing deeper shafts. Ventilation fans improved air quality in some mines, while others relied on furnace ventilation. Safety lamps reduced explosion risks but provided less light than candles. Each innovation brought new dangers alongside benefits. Workers often preferred familiar dangers to unknown risks of new technologies. The development of mine rescue techniques evolved through tragic experience. Early rescue attempts were chaotic, with volunteers rushing into dangerous conditions. Gradually, systematic approaches developed. Rescue teams trained with breathing apparatus, though equipment was primitive. Mine maps, often inaccurate, hindered rescue efforts. The heroism of rescue workers descending into gas-filled mines to save colleagues became legendary. But successful rescues were rare. More often, rescuers recovered bodies. The psychology of mine rescue revealed human nature's best aspects. Miners who might compete for wages cooperated completely in emergencies. Religious and political differences vanished when lives were at stake. The unwritten law that all possible efforts must be made for trapped miners was absolute. This solidarity in crisis reinforced community bonds. The shared risk of mining created mutual obligations that transcended individual interests. Communication systems in mines evolved slowly. Early mines relied on shouting and runners to convey messages. Bell systems using wires allowed simple signals between surface and underground. Speaking tubes, where installed, improved communication but were vulnerable to damage. The isolation of miners working in remote headings remained a constant danger. When accidents occurred, alerting others and coordinating rescue could take fatal hours. The development of mining engineering as a profession created new class dynamics. University-trained engineers, often from privileged backgrounds, directed work they'd never performed. Practical miners, with decades of experience, faced orders from young men who'd never held a pick. This tension between theoretical knowledge and practical experience caused conflicts. The best engineers learned from experienced miners. The worst imposed textbook solutions that ignored local conditions. Mining terminology developed as specialized language encoding generations of experience. Each tool, technique, and geological feature had specific names, often varying between regions. This technical vocabulary excluded outsiders while creating insider identity. Welsh mining terms mixed with English technical language, creating unique linguistic hybrids. The ability to use this language correctly marked authentic membership in mining communities. The international nature of coal markets affected Welsh mining profoundly. Competition from American, German, and Polish mines pressured wages and conditions. Technological advances elsewhere forced Welsh mines to modernize or lose markets. International economic cycles, wars, depressions, trade disputes directly impacted Welsh valleys. Miners who might never travel beyond their valleys were connected to global economic systems. This international awareness influenced political development in mining communities. Immigration into Welsh mining areas created cultural tensions and opportunities. Irish workers fleeing poverty competed for jobs and housing. English workers brought different union traditions and political ideas. Spanish and Italian workers arrived for specific projects. Each group faced discrimination while contributing to cultural diversity. The Welsh language became a marker of indigenous identity against newcomer threats. But practical solidarity often overcame ethnic divisions underground. The role of music in mining communities extended beyond chapels and eisteddfodau. Workplace songs coordinated labor and passed time. Ballads commemorated disasters and strikes. Brass bands funded by worker contributions provided entertainment and pride. The tradition of close harmony singing, developed in chapels, created distinctive Welsh musical culture. International recognition of Welsh male voice choirs brought pride to communities otherwise known only for industrial production. The development of sporting culture in mining areas provided crucial outlets. Football clubs, initially works teams, became community institutions. Boxing, both legal and illegal, offered possibilities for fame and fortune. Pigeon racing combined gambling with animal husbandry skills. These activities provided alternatives to pub culture while reinforcing masculine identity. The success of miners' sports teams against privileged opponents carried class satisfaction. The impact of electrification on mining communities marked major technological transition. Electric lighting underground improved safety and productivity. Electric trams replaced horse and human haulage. But electrification also brought new dangers: electrical fires, electrocution risks, and equipment failures. The skills required for electrical work created new job categories and training needs. Traditional miners viewed electrical workers with suspicion, seeing them as different class of worker. Transportation infrastructure in mining areas prioritized coal over people. Railway lines connected pits to ports, but passenger services were afterthoughts. Roads, where they existed, were poorly maintained. Workers walked miles because transport costs were prohibitive. The isolation of mining communities, despite their industrial importance, reinforced their marginalization. When motor transport eventually arrived, it served management before workers. The development of mining journalism created important historical records. Local newspapers, often allied with either owners or unions, documented daily life alongside major events. mining correspondents developed expertise in technical and labor matters. These newspapers, now valuable historical sources, captured perspectives absent from official records. The tradition of worker correspondence, miners who wrote for radical papers, provided authentic working-class voices. Photography's arrival in mining communities provided visual documentation previously impossible. Professional photographers recorded formal occasions, weddings, union banners, disaster victims. Amateur photography remained rare due to cost. The images that survive show dignity amid hardship, carefully posed family groups, proud work teams, chapel congregations. These photographs humanize statistics, showing individuals where official records show only numbers. The evolution of mining folklore preserved cultural memory through oral tradition. Stories of ghostly miners who warned of danger, of knockers who indicated rich seams, of omens that preceded disasters, served psychological and social functions. This folklore, dismissed as superstition by authorities, encoded practical wisdom and processing of trauma. The figure of the ghostly miner, still working after death, reflected the industry's claim on men's entire existence. Mining museums and heritage sites now preserve physical remnants of the industry. Restored pitheads, underground tours, and preserved cottages allow visitors to glimpse historical conditions, but sanitized presentations cannot convey the heat, dust, and fear of actual mining. The transformation of sites of exploitation into tourist attractions raises complex questions about historical memory and commercial commodification of suffering. The decline of Welsh mining began long before the final closures. Geological exhaustion, international competition, and changing energy sources undermined the industry's viability. Communities built around single industries faced catastrophic adjustment. The skills that defined masculine identity became worthless. The solidarity that sustained struggles became nostalgia. This industrial decline, repeated globally, offers lessons about economic transformation's human costs. Contemporary Welsh identity still bears mining's imprint. Political traditions of solidarity and collective action persist. The Welsh language, preserved in mining communities, enjoys revival. The landscape, scarred but recovering, attracts tourism. Former mining communities struggle with post-industrial challenges while maintaining distinctive cultures. The inheritance is complex: pride and trauma, environmental damage and social progress, preserved traditions and lost ways of life. The global legacy of Welsh mining extends beyond Wales. Safety regulations developed through Welsh disasters protect workers worldwide. Union organising methods pioneered in Welsh valleys influenced international labour movements. Technical innovations in mining engineering spread globally. The Welsh experience of industrialisation, with its extremes of exploitation and resistance, provides historical lessons for contemporary developing nations. Modern energy debates gain perspective from mining history. Current concerns about fossil fuels' environmental impact echo in mining's ecological destruction. Contemporary arguments about just transitions for coal-dependent communities repeat historical patterns. The Welsh experience demonstrates both industrialisation's costs and the resilience of communities facing economic transformation. These historical lessons inform contemporary policy debates about energy, environment, and social justice. The preservation of mining heritage faces challenges as direct memory fades. Former miners age and die, taking personal testimonies with them. Mining communities struggle to maintain cultural institutions without economic basis. The temptation to romanticize or demonize the past threatens nuanced understanding. Balanced historical memory requires acknowledging both mining's necessity in industrial development and its enormous human costs. Educational curricula now include mining history, but coverage remains uneven. Some schools in former mining areas emphasize local heritage. Others prefer to focus on contemporary opportunities rather than industrial past. The challenge lies in making historical experience relevant to young people who may never encounter physical labor. Mining history offers lessons about workers' rights, environmental responsibility, and community resilience that transcend specific industries. Research into mining history continues to reveal new perspectives. Women's history, previously marginalized, receives deserved attention. Environmental historians trace long-term ecological impacts. Medical researchers study genetic effects of mining exposure across generations. This ongoing research ensures mining history remains dynamic rather than fossilized. Each generation discovers new relevance in historical experience. The therapeutic value of acknowledging mining heritage helps communities process collective trauma. Former mining communities often exhibit higher rates of depression and social problems. Understanding historical roots of contemporary problems enables more effective interventions. The pride in mining heritage, balanced with honest acknowledgement of its costs, supports healthy community identity. This psychological dimension of historical memory deserves recognition alongside economic and political aspects. Artistic engagement with mining heritage produces powerful contemporary work. Writers, visual artists, and musicians draw on mining imagery and experience. This creative processing helps communities understand their history while making it accessible to wider audiences. The transformation of industrial experience into art demonstrates culture's resilience and adaptability. Mining's harsh realities, filtered through artistic interpretation, achieve universal human relevance. The comparison between historical mining and contemporary extractive industries worldwide reveals persistent patterns. Whether in Appalachian coal mines, African diamond mines, or South American lithium extraction, similar dynamics appear. Powerful interests exploit desperate workers while externalizing environmental costs. The Welsh experience provides historical precedent for understanding contemporary extraction conflicts. International solidarity, pioneered by Welsh miners supporting global struggles, remains relevant. Gender analysis of mining history reveals complex patterns of oppression and agency. While women's exclusion from underground work reflected genuine dangers, it also limited economic opportunities. Women's informal economic activities demonstrated entrepreneurship under constraints. The strict gender roles of mining communities both protected and constrained women. Contemporary gender equality efforts benefit from understanding these historical complexities rather than imposing anachronistic judgments. The relationship between mining and militarism deserves examination. Mining communities provided disproportionate military recruits seeking escape from industrial danger through military service. Mining skills, discipline, physical courage, technical knowledge transferred to military contexts. Wars disrupted mining communities as men left for service. The return of traumatized veterans to dangerous industrial work compounded psychological burdens. This military-industrial connection shaped mining communities' political development. Religious transformation in post-mining communities reflects broader secularization trends. Chapels that once anchored community life stand empty or repurposed. The fusion of religious and political consciousness that characterized mining communities has largely dissolved. Yet spiritual hungers persist, seeking new forms of expression. The legacy of mining-era religion, emphasis on social justice, community solidarity, and moral purpose, influences contemporary progressive movements. The digitization of mining records enables new research approaches. Census data, employment records, and union archives become searchable databases. Family historians trace mining ancestors. Academic researchers analyze patterns invisible to contemporary observers. This digital preservation ensures mining history remains accessible as physical evidence disappears. The democratization of historical research through digital access allows mining descendants to reclaim their heritage. Climate change gives mining history new relevance. The coal that miners extracted drives contemporary global warming. Former mining communities face environmental justice questions. Should those who suffered most from extraction bear climate change's costs? The transition to renewable energy must consider mining communities' experiences with economic transformation. Historical memory informs just transition policies that avoid repeating past mistakes. The psychological concept of solastalgia, distress caused by environmental change in one's home environment, applies powerfully to mining communities. Residents experience their valleys' transformation from pastoral to industrial landscapes. This environmental grief, unrecognized historically, affected mental health across generations. Understanding historical solastalgia helps process contemporary environmental losses. The mining experience provides precedent for communities facing climate-related landscape changes. International mining heritage networks connect former mining communities globally. Welsh mining museums collaborate with similar institutions worldwide. Former miners' children discover common experiences across cultures. This international connectivity demonstrates industrialization's universal patterns while respecting local specificities. The Welsh mining experience contributes to global understanding of industrial heritage. The question of reparations for mining communities remains contentious. Mining companies extracted enormous wealth while leaving environmental damage and broken communities. Legal systems protected capital through limited liability, while workers bore unlimited consequences. Contemporary discussions about historical justice must consider mining's legacy. The principle that those who profited from extraction should contribute to restoration has relevance beyond mining. Educational exchanges between former mining communities and developing industrial regions share historical lessons. Welsh experts advise communities facing industrial transformation. Historical experience informs contemporary policy. The mistakes and successes of Welsh mining provide learning opportunities. This knowledge transfer honours mining heritage while supporting contemporary communities. The role of mining in shaping modern environmental consciousness deserves recognition. The visible destruction of mining landscapes helped spark environmental movements. Mining communities' experience of pollution preceded broader environmental awareness. The tension between economic necessity and environmental protection, first evident in mining regions, remains central to contemporary debates. Mining history provides case studies for balancing human needs with ecological limits. Technological unemployment, now widespread concern, first appeared in mining communities. Mechanical coal cutters displaced skilled hewers. Conveyor systems eliminated haulage jobs. Mining communities' experience with technological change, resistance, adaptation, and social support for displaced workers offers lessons for contemporary automation debates. The human costs of technological progress, starkly evident in mining history, inform contemporary policy discussions. The concept of sacrifice zones, areas deemed expendable for industrial purposes, originated in mining regions. Entire valleys were sacrificed for coal extraction. Communities bore health and environmental costs, while profits flowed elsewhere. This pattern, repeated globally, raises ethical questions about industrial development. Mining history demonstrates sacrifice zones' long-term consequences for affected populations. Cultural resilience in mining communities demonstrates human adaptability. Despite harsh conditions, communities created rich cultural lives. Music, literature, and social institutions flourished alongside industrial exploitation. This cultural resilience provides hope for contemporary communities facing economic transformation. The mining experience shows that human creativity and solidarity can survive even extreme hardship. The medicalization of mining-related health problems evolved slowly. Miners' asthma became pneumoconiosis through medical advocacy. Recognition of occupational disease required overcoming industry resistance and medical conservatism. This historical struggle informs contemporary battles over occupational health recognition. Mining history demonstrates the importance of worker advocacy in medical progress. The role of mining in creating modern Wales cannot be overstated. Industrial transformation through coal created contemporary Welsh geography, demography, and culture. The concentration of population in valleys, the tradition of collective action, the emphasis on education and culture all stem from mining experience. Understanding modern Wales requires understanding its mining heritage. International labour solidarity, pioneered by miners, established patterns of global cooperation. Welsh miners supported struggles in other countries through financial contributions and political action. This internationalism, based on shared experiences of exploitation, challenged narrow nationalisms. The mining tradition of international solidarity influences contemporary global justice movements. The preservation of mining landscapes as industrial heritage raises complex questions. Should slag heaps be removed or preserved as historical monuments? How can dangerous industrial sites be made safe while maintaining authenticity? The transformation of exploitation sites into heritage attractions requires sensitive handling. Mining communities deserve voice in determining how their history is preserved and presented. Future research directions in mining history remain rich. Environmental historians examine long-term ecological impacts. Medical researchers study intergenerational health effects. Social historians explore family and community dynamics. Each discipline reveals new aspects of mining experience. The complexity of mining history ensures continued scholarly interest while serving contemporary needs. The ultimate lesson of Welsh mining history may be resilience in the face of extremity. Communities faced dangerous work, poverty, and environmental destruction, yet created meaningful lives. They preserved language and culture against homogenizing forces. They pioneered labor organization and political representation. This resilience, born of necessity, provides inspiration for contemporary challenges. The miners who descended into darkness each day demonstrated that human dignity can survive even the harshest conditions. As we reflect on this extensive history, the individual miner remains central. Behind statistics of coal production and death rates were human beings making daily choices about survival and dignity. Their struggles created rights and protections we inherit. Their suffering demands remembrance not as victimhood, but as human endurance. The Welsh coal miner, representative of industrial workers globally, embodies both industrial capitalism's costs and human capacity to resist, adapt, and ultimately transcend circumstances. The wheel at the pithead no longer turns in most Welsh valleys. The cages no longer descend carrying men into darkness. But the legacy remains, in landscape, in culture, in memory. The story of Welsh coal mining, particular in its details but universal in its themes, continues to speak to contemporary concerns about work, community, environment, and human dignity. in remembering those who worked and died in the deep places of the earth. We honor not just their memory, but their contribution to the ongoing human struggle for justice and dignity in labor. This extended meditation on Welsh mining history serves multiple purposes. It preserves memory of experiences that shaped millions of lives. It provides lessons for contemporary industrial and environmental challenges. It honors those whose labor built the modern world while bearing its heaviest costs. Most importantly, it reminds us that behind every historical statistic were human beings deserving of dignity, remembrance, and justice. The coal miners of 19th century Wales, through their struggles and endurance, created legacies that continue to influence our world. Their story, told here at length, represents countless similar stories from industrial regions worldwide. Stories of exploitation and resistance, suffering and solidarity, darkness and the persistent human drive toward light. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, here are 2 more videos I believe you'll like. See you in the next one.